So now, brothers, we speak something about the understanding of the church as we have got it in the Vatican II. So church in the teaching of Vatican II. First point is the Council's theological vision of the church. Now, in these past few years, there has been a tremendous interest in the church. Past few years, I mean, past few decades, or the last century, the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Now the situation is different. Now there is no big interest in the church. Jesus is church, no. That is the attitude of people now. But then what I am saying is, just the years previous to Vatican II, there was a big interest among the people in Europe. Especially in the years of Vatican II, there was an enormous interest. The climax of the ecclesial interest was the council itself, with the two important documents, Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes. So the people were looking for an answer about what the church is, what is the function, and the mission of the church. At that time, the whole concentration was on saving of the souls, salvation of individuals, and prayer and the Eucharist and so on were just means ensuring salvation of the soul. All these were questioned towards the end of the 19th century. In the middle of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. So there was a lot of inquiry and a desire to know. So this brought up a lot of studies, a lot of literature was created in the background of this, especially the Protestants. We Catholics had the limitation of the magisterium saying you should not read the Bible. If you read, you will become like Protestants. Everywhere, another church, every person will be starting a church and so on. So, official interpretation of the Bible was the privilege of the church authorities. So, people were not reading Bible. Our people were not allowed to read the Bible. Protestants were allowed. Not Protestants were allowed. They started translation of the Bible from Latin into other vernacular language of Europe. So, first was Luther with German translation of the Bible. Then further other translations took place. People began to read the Bible. Whereas we Catholics remained without reading the Bible. Touching the Bible. So, the development of the understanding of the Bible took place actually among the Protestants. And the great Protestant figures like Karl Barth and so on, especially Karl Barth, emerged in the beginning of the 20th century, 1920s, 1930s and so on there. And they discovered new depth in the Bible. They made studies. At that time also, the archaeological research began to be taking place in Jerusalem. People were digging out things, and then the original time of Jesus, the remnants of that was found. And they could verify, compare that with the biblical account and see a lot of similarities, and then many things in the Bible came to be more clearly understood. Confusions were removed when this archaeological research was made, and then there was a lot of research. And our present day understanding of the church is thanks to this big research that took place at this period, mainly Protestants. That is what is interesting. Then afterwards, with the Divine Afflante Spiritu of Pope Pius the, I don't remember his name exactly. Though with that, we were allowed to read the Bible, and people began to study Bible. And then we have all the great theologians, philosophers in the Catholic Church. They are great as the others, or even greater than the Protestant theologians. Like, for example, we have got Rahner, Hans Küng, and people like that. And then the theologians, biblical scholars like Schnackenburg, Gnilka, Gerhard, I forget his name. Gerhard, I said his name, no, previously before. Gerhard Löffing, and people like that. And so there was a big inquiry, a search about the meaning of the Bible, meaning of the church, what is the church for, and so on. So the council was actually a council which began for understanding the meaning of the church. What is the church? That was the first inquiry. Other councils previously were always councils which corrected the heretical teachings of others and clashed with the other thinking people, Trent and so on. Only afterwards also the Vatican I. Their new dogmas were defined, and other people's interpretation of the theological position was considered as wrong, and we were establishing our position. And there was a conflict kind of situation. So dogmatic explanation of things were the interest of the councils. But this council, Vatican II, was not deviated by all this kind of interest of proving the others wrong or establishing our dogmatic position. Council made no dogmas at all. Council made an inquiry into what the church is and what the church's relationship with the world is. So we have two beautiful documents, Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes. Then other documents related to the internal life of the church and the organization of the church. Other documents also are there, but basically the interest was centered on the church. In this search for the church, we can find these two documents as important, Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes. There is also another document, another encyclical of Pope Paul VI, Ecclesiam Suam. The council was very much concerned about presenting an image of the church as a reference point to grasp its identity and its mission in the world today. So that was it. The identity of the church and the mission of the church, that was what the council fathers wanted to find out. And they wanted to discuss about it not in the form of a dogmatic statement or dogmatic definition. Previously, dogmatic definition used to be there. And we have a dogmatic definition from Cardinal Bellarmine. No, you know the story. You know, the church is made up of the people who obey the same authority and have the same sacraments and believe in the same creed and so on. So that type of definition is not possible to contain the reality of the mystery of the church. Only this the kind of definition means it is not a proper definition of the church at all. Who are all members of the church? Those who go to the church, those who receive the sacraments, those who obey the Pope. These are the members of the church. So only that we know. We do not know any further insight about the church. Really insight about the church, what the church is, what the church's function is, how it should relate to others. All that church came to understand with the Vatican II. And that is why the importance of Vatican II. Though no dogmatic definitions, still the identity of the church, the mission of the church, about this the church became self-conscious, church became clear. So they were presenting an image of the church. So rather than making a definition, image. Why image? Image is dynamic. Definition is static, limited, finished. In an image, we can see more and more insights. For example, if you want to praise the king, the poets will come and say many things. They will not say the king is 6 feet tall, 1 feet 56 inches breast, chest, and he's got muscles. They will not say those things. They will say something more beautiful. Yeah, for example, Chandramukhan. Oh, your face is like a moon. Or you say you are so many kinds of images. Poets speak in terms of images. Always. They speak of reality from another deeper perception, point of view of a deeper perception. So the king is presented as like a moon. And what does that mean? In the moonlight, it is very cool. Compared to sunlight, it is very hot. It's very pleasant. So with the king, you are very pleasant. Your presence is like a grace. Your presence is very pleasing to us. We would like to have you always. And you are someone who transforms our life with beauty. All these ideas are in that simple image. Image you can interpret. Image you can symbolically develop. So that is the beauty of image. With the help of image, you can go deeper and deeper into the reality of the king. Same way, an image. For example, church is, for example, people of God. It is an image. Then church is also sacrament of salvation. That is another image. Then church is the icon of the Trinity, another image. So with the different images like this, we are able to understand the church more closely, more deeply, and more correctly. And so the church, the council wanted to develop or think in these terms, develop presenting image of the church as a reference point to grasp the identity and mission of the church in the world today. So the identity of the church, what is the church? You can develop any of these images and then come to understand more and more deeply. And if you are not satisfied with the one explanation, you can have another kind of explanation which gives you more insight into the reality of the church. So church wanted to give an image or give images. So the Vatican understanding, Vatican II, understanding of Vatican II will be in terms of the different images. It wanted to express the vision of the church that would generate new enthusiasm among the faithful and offer an alternative way to the way the world perceived the reality of the church at that time. A new way of understanding, new way of perceiving. Was this vision, what was this vision? And did the council succeed? So that is a question that we are now asking. So in the process we will develop the way Vatican II saw the church, the teaching of the church in Vatican II. The council did not define the church in clear concepts, as I said. The council fathers, however, were very concerned with correcting the church image, which was generally considered as too big and in many ways out of touch with the contemporary reality. The first concern was to go beyond a purely apologetical approach to the self-understanding of the church, so common in the time after Reformation and in the wake of Enlightenment. So the church wanted to go beyond the apologetical understanding. What is apologetical understanding? Apologia. Yeah, defending. Church was forced to defend itself after the Reformation. What is Reformation? The time of reform brought in by Luther and others. So the time Reformation is the name of a particular period. Reformation in English means changing and reforming, right? Now, when we speak of reform in the history of the church or in the theological context, Reformation means this particular period when Luther came out and brought in Reformation, and church brought in counter-Reformation. So he reformed things, then church said no, this is not a thing. So Reformation, counter-Reformation. You see fighting, contradictions. So yeah, that is the that determined the atmosphere of the church for a long time. Really fighting, literally fighting. Luther was joined by other princes, and the Pope had also an army, and the Pope was also strong. So Pope was fighting on one side, and other princes were fighting on the other side. And there used to be war in the name of the teaching of the church, in the name of religion. 100 years, for 100 years, war going on for generations of people. I am born in the middle of the war. I fight, or my father fights and he dies, and so on. Then I go for war. I fight and I suffer for the war. Then my children fight. 4 generations at least, that is 100 years means 100 years of war. And if you have 100 years of war in the name of religion, how will they respect religion? How will they love religion? As a result of that, the Europeans do not have any misunderstanding that religion is good. Religion is bad. Religion causes war. So religion should be eliminated. That is the understanding of the Europeans. Now, they speak of secularism in the background of this experience. Religion is experienced by them as causing fight and struggle in the world. So 100 years of war has been one of the basic experiences of the Europeans, which made them reject the sacred and turn to the secular. And in the 19th century, the whole question was there about how is it? What is the relationship between the sacred and the secular? Until then, the sacred was the major thing. The Pope used to decide who is to be the king, who is to be ruling which country. Pope used to divide. So the sacred was the top on the top, and the secular was a servant. So everything had to be done, every development has to be done for the church. Church must develop. So all the kings of the whole world, I mean European world, most of them all of them were Christians. So not like in our situation, pluralism of religion and so on, that is gone. So all Christians were under the Pope, and Pope decided. So Pope became a super king, or kind of an emperor, emperor of the emperors. So he used to decide. With the 100 Years' War, the whole thing is now in conflict. Some people are opposing the Pope. The Protestants are opposing the Pope. So Pope's position as the sole arbitrator of the situation was questioned, and the whole thing is in a flux. And there the church had to decide, or church has to come to an understanding of the role of religion in the world. Is it supposed to be separate totally? Is religion supposed to be a purely private affair? Has religion got anything to do in the public? So that situation came also in this council. So the first concern was to go beyond any purely apologetical approach, which was there after the Reformation, self-defending, and then defending with arms. Not only with the words and arguments, but also with arms. So as apologetical approach, we want to go beyond that and get a real self-understanding of the church. And the Reformation and Enlightenment period, and then the bitterness of the Reformation and Enlightenment period, the church wanted to leave behind and go forward. So you see, the European history has influenced the church very much. It has, in one way, damaged the church. The true nature of the church has been Europeanized, and the true image of God has also been in this way presented as rival to worldly powers, and Pope as fighting with army, going on horseback. Today we cannot think of those kind of things. So that was the mixture of politics and religion. Now that mixture is gone. Politics has declared itself independent of religion in Europe. In India, it is still not that kind of a hopeless situation. Still. Religion has got a role to play. And religion has got politics. Politics is part of, they don't break that relationship. In Europe, religion has no politics. Religion should not enter into politics. And even now, when our bishops and other people say, you people, religious people, you should not do, you are speaking politics. Don't speak politics in the church. They have got a reason in the European history. Don't speak politics in the church. That is a European experience. Today, in the church, we have to speak also concerning politics. And barring politics from the church was also a way of preserving the oppressive situation. Don't speak politics in the church. That means don't bring out the power of the people which comes from religious allegiance to oppose any injustice. So religion should not oppose injustice. So if you don't speak about politics in the church, don't relate it to the religion, then it will not oppose. Religion is a very tremendous force socially. And so when the present hierarchy also, our bishops also will say, don't speak politics, supposing as politics in the church. We are not interested in political party politics, but politics of the development, politics of development of people. And politics actually means development of the polis. Polis is the Greek word for city. So the development of the city, development of the people, development of the society, about that we have to be concerned. So we have to have politics. Not the type of politics which makes people fight with each other, but the politics which makes people concerned about the future development of society, in which way it has to go and so on. So we have to be political if we are interested in the kingdom of God. We are not just flying into the heavens and escaping. Religion is considered a means of escape. In Europe now, religion is an escapism. So it's a private business. That is not reconcilable with the Christian understanding of the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God is something that takes place in the world, and in the world any change or reformation or any advancement or development can be made only with the politics. And supposing religion has nothing to do with politics, then how can you think about kingdom of God? We need to have politics, but not the politics of fighting, not the politics of party, the politics of the criticism in the light of the Christian values, a politics of warning to the government, this way is not right, from the background of our understanding of the kingdom of God, which is brought to the people and the people discuss about it. And people are conscious about values and they want values. And this kind of a politics. And the politicians must be subjected to the realization of values, not their self-centered concern for making more money and power. Power and wealth, that should not be the concern of politics. But then now it is that. So this kind of a wrong type of politics can be challenged only when religion, church or kingdom of God is also playing a role in politics. The right type of politics, not the present type of politics, where one bishop wants to be the superior bishop and other he wants to destroy the other bishop. Then one group of people kill the other people. The rector is killed by one group of people. That kind of politics is not politics. That is not what we want. So that we must keep away from that type of power politics. Power politics. Politics as service. Leadership as service. That is Jesus' way. Service as leadership as service and politics as leadership. So all that is required. We come to know that this can be had only when we make a self-examination of ourselves. I mean, the church made a self-examination of itself and tried to find out what actually it is, what its ultimate goal and purpose is. The discussion in the Vatican Council was very helpful. And we have gone now very far in the understanding of our own self, church as self. We are the church. What we are supposed to do, what our function in the world is, all that we have gone very far forward. But then the people outside have not. So the Vatican Reformation, even after 60 or 60 years, it has not penetrated to the people. The people who are born after Vatican II, let's say 50, 60 years, most of the people have not heard about it. They think only of the religion in the old understanding. Well, religion is religion, where you do all kinds of rituals and things like that to please God, so that my life may be blessed by Him, so I can get more money and things like that. That is the basis of religion for many. That has long been changed in the understanding of the Vatican II. That has not yet come. Now youngsters, I don't know if youngsters are aware of Vatican II. Were you all aware of Vatican II before you joined the seminary? I don't think. You may have heard some little bit of things about your parish priest preaching, but no parish priests have been preaching very insistently and enthusiastically about the Vatican II. So the values of the Vatican II has not reached the people. Vatican II has made a big change in the world of involvement of the church, and for the history it has made a big change, and we have to come to understand the meaning of Vatican II. So how does Vatican II understand the church? It is certainly not in the way it was being understood in the past. A new way of understanding, and that understanding is in terms of images. So, as a result, we find in the documents on the church refreshing return to the biblical understanding of the church and the rich heritage of the fathers, especially St. Augustine. So the interest of the church was understanding of deeper understanding, and so the fathers went away from the apologetic type of literature, went back to the Bible. Bible was a very sure foundation. Went back to the Bible, and in the Bible they found images which they can take and try to correspond it to the reality of the church, and then learn from the image what the church is and so on. And also fathers, especially Augustine. One of the greatest of the church fathers is Augustine. Besides, the theological spiritual insights of the contemporary theologians were seriously considered when the council elaborated the new understanding of the church. So this also is important. The thinking of the contemporary man, the philosophical understanding of the world, it had developed very much from the time of Aristotle, for example, or even say, let us say, from the time of Descartes, everything was subjective, I existence, or that kind of thing. All that was challenged in the Enlightenment period. The whole way of looking at the world went a paradigm shift. Understanding the world as metaphysically real has been changed. There is a big change. Metaphysics has come to an end. Metaphysics died. Metaphysics died. I mean, there is no more metaphysics which is able to explain things as they are. The thinking has gone to phenomenological way of understanding. You understand, I suppose, metaphysical thinking and phenomenological thinking and the difference between these two. I have explained it in the first year. Okay. Faith and I'll just mention a little bit more if you want. Metaphysical thinking is thinking about reality. This is reality, this thing. So what is this made up of? So Aristotle said it is made up of form and matter. Before Aristotle, his teacher, Plato, what did he say? He said, these are all images. The reality is in the ideal world, or let us say in heaven. So true reality is in the ideal world. What we have is only the shadows. Shadows. So these are not real. So this world, we cannot depend on that world. So when it is translated to the Christian terms, let us not be too concentrated in this world. This is a world of appearance. Real thing is in heaven. So let us think of heaven. So let us say all pious activities, say rosary, this thing, that thing, and so on, they go to heaven. Let us not worry about the world. This idea comes from the Platonic thinking. Yeah. That thinking changed with Aristotle to some extent. These things became real. And he made matter and form abstractions with which he was working. And at that time, there was a big, later on, when the Mohammedans came in the 6th and 7th century, everything about Aristotle was forgotten by the Europeans. And the Arabs took away the books and they translated it into Syriac and other Arabic languages. They preserved the teaching of Aristotle till the church people got it in the 13th century. So many hundreds of years, Aristotle was forgotten. And the Arabs, Muslims, they brought it back, and St. Thomas and so on took up Aristotelian thinking. Aristotle was considered an atheist. And therefore, to speak of Aristotle, to use his theology, his philosophy was considered prohibited, forbidden by the church. But anyway, Thomas took it up, and Thomas was also had a very bad stage in his theologizing. He was called heretic, and he was unacceptable and so on. Now Thomas has become the accepted philosopher, theologian of the church and so on. So that thinking was also metaphysical. It is speaking about things and realities. So what I say about reality is the final thing, the truth. This is a dusk. This is a glass of water. True, nothing more to know about it. Finished. That was so clear, and that was in some way settling the mind of the people. Questions were not there very much there. But then comes Kant. Kant raises question about the objectivity of things. And he says, the reality in itself, Ding and Sich, reality in itself we cannot know. What we know is the impressions or the perceptions of our consciousness about that reality. Reality is there, but what that is, I do not know. I cannot say anything about the reality as it is. I only know about my consciousness, about the reality, and about that I can speak to you all because you also have consciousness, and your consciousness may be sometimes deeper than mine. So then you can share your thing, and I am ready to understand from you. So we can speak it phenomenologically and deepen our perception of things, but no more about the reality in itself. Reality itself we do not know. For example, that what is the table there? What is actually in my consciousness? The table is not in my consciousness. The table is not in the table is there. Whatever it is, the reality is there. And I perceive that in terms of distance, so much. That is a mental category. And causality, somebody must have made that. So some noise came. I know somebody, causality. So color, causality, space, distance, all these kind of categories of thinking, they are all in my mind. And I perceive the world in terms of my categories, and therefore I am thinking according to my way of thinking, according to my basic possibilities. A dog may not have the understanding of causality, I do not know, subject, object, distance, and so on, so on. I don't think. And the dog will see the desk as I see. No guarantee. A snake, we see the reality. The great snake, snakes don't have, some snakes don't have even a sense of color. So they may not know. We see it as brown, black, white, yellow, and so on. Snake may not see it. Now, which is true? The snake's way of seeing or my way of seeing? Supposing my way of seeing is, let us say, I have a colored glass, yellow, then all that I see will be yellow. And so, how do I know that I don't have a glass now? This glass is making me see things like this. So, thing in itself we do not know. So, we cannot speak about thing in itself. All that we can say is about ourselves. So, metaphysics was thinking about talking. So, metaphysics has come to an end. Metaphysics, the death of metaphysics, people speak about that. And the understanding of phenomenology, we become humble. We say we do not know the reality in itself. Previously, people were powerful. No, I know what reality is. Now we say I do not know. I have only the consciousness which is there in me, and I speak about that. And then I enlarge on my consciousness, and there is an understanding of the commonness of humanity. So what is part of my consciousness is also likely part of your consciousness. And when I explain a deeper element of my consciousness, you will discover a deeper element in your own consciousness. So my talking and your talking can sometimes agree. A philosopher or a theologian or a poet can see deeper things in his consciousness, and therefore he can speak about that. And what we are now doing in theology is precisely this: a phenomenological language, phenomenological perception of what is deep in the consciousness. And I speak that to you, especially also development of language. Language also is something wonderful, miraculous. And so the metaphors and the similes and other figures of speech, all these also are able to give me more understanding about the reality, understanding about the reality, but not reality in itself. So I speak a language of phenomenology. Today, theology is phenomenological. It is no more metaphysical. So this understanding has taken place in the 19th century. And that the result is that in the 20th century, Vatican II. Before Vatican II, this understanding was not there. There were people who were at the height of their arrogance of knowledge of things. They know what things are, what God is, they know. What heaven is, almost like they know, of course. St. Thomas had said, we do not know. And others have said, Indian understanding of neti. Not that. If you say anything, Indian philosopher will say neti. About God, whatever you say, neti. God is the greatest being in the world, neti. God is not a being. Or God is omnipresent, omnipotent, neti. Everything he will say it is neti. And that is the deepest human beings can reach with regard to the knowledge of God. Humility and understanding of one's own limitation. So this understanding which the Indians had at that time, the Europeans get only after Kant. I mean, I'm not saying this to compare philosophies and theologies among the people, but then the sense that we Indian people have of not being any intellectually sharp and good is not correct. Our forefathers, our rishis and leaders and teachers, they had a deep perception of reality, and they had wonderful. And we can develop a thinking based on that. It is only now we have got the sense of independence to go back to our own style of thinking and to develop theology. And we will be developing. The theological development in the future will be taking place in India and other places in the future. So we will go back and we will do that. So at the moment we feel a little bit of inferiority complex. We are now overcoming that inferiority complex. We have now overcome. Like I am speaking now, nobody would have spoken about 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Now any theology professor will speak more or less the way I speak. So they have got a greater respect for Indian tradition. Previously, they would not have any. Indian tradition is considered bad, and children of the devil and all those kind of understandings were the terminologies. But today, no. We respect our rishis and our tradition, and we have understanding. So the Vatican II had broken with the metaphysical thinking and the dogmatic understanding connected with the metaphysical thinking, and made a big progress. And therefore, we now have the wisdom and depth of the Vatican II, which we have to imbibe, we have to take from Vatican II, and we will be looking at that in the coming